And right now you should see a forest, and I just put the presentation on. So in principle, you should see SAP for SMEs, Grow with SAP. Is that something that's visible for you guys?
Yep, good here.
All right. So I think this Grow with SAP story is, it's been around for a little while. It's been launched by SAP 3 years ago, but there's still a lot of questions around it because things keep evolving, and SAP has the typical habit of kind of remodeling and reshaping what their offerings are. So I thought it might be interesting to have a specific discussion or a bit of an interaction around Grow, which is why I decided to push through with this particular presentation. Now, I was supposed to be joined by Graham, but Graham actually has a few project meetings which are running over, and as a consequence, he will not be able to join. So I'll need to do it on my own, which means if you have any questions, make it interactive, raise the question either in the chat. Monica and the team will help me put my focus on it if that's needed, or just interrupt me while we're talking. Always happy to just have a debate. So who am I? For those who don't know me, but I saw today that there's quite a few people that actually I have history with. So that is it's a great pleasure to see you all. But for those that don't know me, I've been in the IT industry for over 25 years. I've done a lot of shared services transformation, and in the last 10 years, between 2011 and 2023, I've basically set up Delaware in Southeast Asia, which is a big SAP systems integrator with a focus on everything in SAP in the cloud. I left Delaware in the beginning of 2024, and I joined Icon because in Icon, we have a true, very strong cloud focus, and I have some ideas on how I can do things a bit different than what I did in my previous life at Delaware. So who is Icon? Icon is actually a company was incorporated in 2017, so relatively young, with an initial focus on technology staffing, and then mainly in the SAP space, but also around Microsoft and some other specialist technologies. So what we historically always have done is provide specialist skills, so consultants, to companies who require this. And within that context, we've basically worked with all the big names in the industry, the Accentures, the Infosys, and so forth of the world, but also a lot with end customers like PHP, Billiton, Zulich Pharma, and a number of other companies. Now, we are AI enabled because we have our own AI technology platform to help us do the matching between the profile and the opportunity. So we basically use technology to improve this. And what I came in to do in Icon in 2024 is basically start an Icon services offering. So instead of only the staffing side, I'm actually focused on delivering projects and support services out of our Center of Excellence in Vietnam. So we have a big team in Vietnam in the meanwhile, about 25 people based out of Vietnam. And then I have 15 people across the region in different countries, Singapore, amongst others, but also in Malaysia, in Australia. We have a team in Japan as well, and so forth. Good. So let's start with a question. As always, I've prepared two simple questions, a bit of a poll to understand a bit more background on how certain people see certain things or what kind of footprint you have and so forth. So Fitri, could you please put the question on screen? So the first one is just for me to understand a little bit on how comfortable everyone is and how up to date everyone is with all the different offerings that SAP has. As I mentioned earlier, SAP has a habit of tweaking their offerings over time, or not just SAP, pretty much every company out there has it. But because of this, sometimes it gets a bit complicated to understand what is out there in the market. So have a look at that first question. So what does SAP actively position in the market? It's a multiple choice question. So in principle, you should be able to answer on multiple of the options that are available. And then in terms of SAP Grow. So Grow is a bit more recent, and I'll go into much more detail here. So what are key features of SAP Grow? Is it an on-premise deployment? Does it have these industry best practices and rapid implementation? It focuses on large enterprise, and it has AI capabilities, and it's highly scalable. So which of these options are we talking about? And I'll give, I don't know how many people we have in the call. We have 13 people in the call, I think. Oh no, we have 30 people in the call. And about, let's see, 15 have answered the question so far. So I'll give you guys a bit more time to answer or to provide some additional answers, so we get a bit more accuracy in our polling. Okay, we have about 60% of the participants that have replied. A participant has asked to start AI Companion. That's an interesting one. You can change access permissions in the AI Companion panel. Monica, could you help me with this one? Participant has asked me to start an AI Companion. I'm not so sure I need to give people access to this or not.
Oh, usually it's like a note taker. No, I don't see that. Sorry.
Okay, I'll just start the AI Companion. Let's see what happens then.
Oh yeah, it might just be a transcription service. That should be okay.
Yeah, okay. All right, good. In that case, in the meanwhile, we have 22 people that have replied, so thanks for that, 73%. I'll end the poll and I'll put the results on screen. So in essence, what are ERP offerings does SAP actively position in the market? S/4HANA Private Cloud, and that was actually a bit of a trick question, because in principle, SAP positions S4 Rise or S4 Grow, and I'll show that in a bit more detail later. There are still on-premise deployments, of course, and there are upgrades happening in on-premise deployments, but that's not something that SAP actively pushes and positions in the market. S/4HANA Private Cloud as an individual product is also not immediately being positioned as a product that they sell. It's really S4 Rise or S4 Grow that is the main focus of SAP. And then which of the following are key features of SAP Grow? So it's not an on-premise deployment, so most people actually got that right. It is a pure cloud solution. And again, I'll come to that in a bit more detail later. It has a very, very rich industry best practices and accelerators to help you implement those. So that is the rapid implementation part. So that's indeed correct for most people. It does not focus on large enterprise, to the contrary, and it focuses on entry companies that want to scale up. And of course, AI plays a big role, and it scales because it is the same mature technology stack that you see that is being used in larger organizations. So thanks for providing the feedback on this. I will include the outcomes of this in the slide deck that we will send out later. And then I will continue the presentation for now. Okay, so before we actually go into what Grow itself is, this is a slide that I used previously, I think in October or November or something in the presentation. So SAP has a view on the business mindset, and I thought it's interesting enough to repeat this, because it's actually something that is not unique to SAP, but actually quite generally applicable to the market, and not even just the ERP market. Now, in a traditional mindset, companies that are more prudent or companies that have certain specific requirements, they will stay on premise. And that is the traditional mindset. And that is, of course, not where the world is going. Now, in a mindset where companies have more openness to adopt cloud and to leverage of technologies that are cloud or unique to cloud, you are talking about companies that are happy to do infrastructure as a service. It's an advanced mindset, and it's still something that you see quite commonly in the market. We get very often questions on, can we just host that ourselves in our own private cloud and so forth? So it is quite common. To a certain extent, it still limits the adoption of the most advanced technologies, because these most advanced technologies typically come in a full cloud or a SaaS setup, so a software as a service setup, where you have a true cloud product that evolves in a way that most cloud products actually evolve with automatic updates and so forth. So continuous adoption of innovation with cloud ERP, with the automatic releases of new functionalities and so forth, that is actually where most of the future-oriented companies are expected to be. And slowly, the market, no doubt, is actually going to be evolving in that direction too. Now, why do we do this cloud setup? We don't only do it because of innovation. We also do it because we don't want all these problems that we had in the past with our heavily customized systems. If you look on the left-hand side, on-premise or private cloud deployments even, you have systems that are often very customized and as a consequence become very difficult to update. If you look at the clean core concept that SAP introduced with the S/4HANA Cloud, you will basically be able to run your clean core and your extensions in a side-by-side setup. And that is increasingly flexible with the BTP platform that is evolving, with the integration that is more standardized and more APIs that are becoming available and so forth. So this one I always like to touch on very shortly because it is core of what we do, and not just SAP does, but what many ERP companies are doing in the cloud space. So what is then SAP's market focus? And this is why I also raised that in the poll. So for SAP, they go cloud. So on-premise is not really a thing that they focus on anymore. And of course, as I mentioned before, there is big deployments out there that that without question will continue to exist, and they will be upgraded and so forth. So there will be companies that run on-premise software. But in principle, SAP's go-to-market is really focused on S/4HANA Cloud. Now, within cloud or within the cloud offering, you have two different flavors or different packagings that SAP brings to market. On the one hand, you have Grow, and on the other hand, you have Rise with SAP. And under Rise, I'll touch on this one first because it's something that I will not go into more detail on during this session, is in Rise, you basically have roughly, or the focus roughly is install-based customers. And these install-based customers can either go to public cloud if they want to truly leverage of cloud ERP, or they can go to a private cloud edition, which is a privately hosted or an SAP hosted. It's an SAP hosted full stack S/4HANA deployment. So in this situation, you can still have the same issues like you had in the past with the heavy customization and so forth, which can be either an advantage or a disadvantage. And the moment that you go to cloud from your on-premise solution or from a private cloud hosted solution that you have today, you can actually either move to a situation where your system becomes easier to maintain, or you can retain whatever you had from the past because you had big investments done and so forth. So that's a bit a personal a specific choice that every company needs to make for themselves. So under the Rise umbrella, that is basically the options that you have. So you can run S/4HANA Public Cloud. And for now, this still is linked to a greenfield implementation, because S/4HANA Public Cloud right now doesn't yet allow a migration from an on-premise or an older version of SAP. Now, there are people talking about this. SNP, which is a specialist in data transformation, that actually has software to do carve-outs or merges and so forth, and to do selective data transformation. SNP, as far as I hear, is working on a tool that will enable companies to move from ECC to S/4HANA Public Cloud. They say it's going to be Q2, Q3 this year. We'll see. Something interesting that is happening. Now, for those companies that are not yet on SAP, so companies that don't have an installed base or not part of the installed base, they can actually look at Grow. And then Grow is focused on net new mid-sized customers, it says here, but actually it's already in the lower end of the mid-market that companies can look at adopting Grow. And Grow is always an SAP S/4HANA Cloud Public Edition And of course, since there is no SAP footprint yet, it will be a greenfield implementation. Good. Then to put us all on the same page, so what is S/4HANA Public Cloud? Public Cloud is shared infrastructure, standardized processes with a lot of different variants possible. So there's a lot of flexibility these days. When S/4HANA Public Cloud was launched in 2015, it was a lot less flexible than it is today. So we are currently, and I'll come to that later also, we're currently engaged in a global deployment of an S4 public platform, one instance, and we're basically deploying it to 140 countries, which means there is a need for a lot of deviation, or to some extent, deviation country by country. And these things we can actually entertain. Now, a multi-tenant solution, shared infrastructure with a hard requirement for upgrades twice per year. So it's unconditional. And there are regular hotfixes, typically once or twice a month. A number of hotfixes are being released. And all of this, most of the time, happens in a quite transparent fashion. So it's quite stable. There are not a lot of issues in these upgrades, except for areas where you're talking about integration points and so forth. Those are always a bit sensitive and worthwhile testing when upgrades happen. If you look at the mainline or the mainline ERP solutions of SAP, this is S/4HANA Public Cloud is the most cost-effective mainline ERP that SAP has on offer. Because of the shared infrastructure and so forth, it's a lot cheaper to operate because you pay a subscription per user to operate the platform. Now, what then is Grow? Now, Grow is actually S/4HANA Cloud Public Edition. So that full stack ERP in a multi-tenant setup that actually comes with a number of additional capabilities that are part of the SAP Cloud platform. So the business technology platform is a number of these capabilities that you see here under base and premium. So base and premium are two different offerings of S/4HANA Grow. And in the base offering, you will get some capabilities to do process automation, to do some cooperation. CPA credits for SAP BTP are basically credits to use the different microservices under the business technology platform. So you get some credits to do maybe some integration or to build some applications or things like this. The base solution also has digital access to allow integrations and group reporting with a limited set of companies. So typically, S/4HANA Public Cloud in Grow will be implemented only for smaller companies, even though you can do many, but it starts off with one entity or one company code, and then you can build a few more, but typically you will start small. And as a consequence, the base functionality that they provide is a good starting point for a smaller company. Now, if you then see that there is additional requirements around financial closing, cash management, and so forth, and you can read these things, these become available as part of Premium. Now, the moment that Premium will scale up, you can continue to buy additional licenses or additional user licenses, FUE, full user equivalent, and the platform can scale. So it can grow with you. If you look at the company, which I just left last year at Delaware, we adopted S4 Public Cloud in 2015 in the Grow mindset. And we grew from, originally we were about 800 people using the platform, and then we went to about 5,500 people that were using the platform. So it can grow and scale with your organization as your organization grows. Now, the big question then is, of course, what about accelerated deployment? Now, in 2015, when we did the original implementation of S4 Public, there was, of course, sorry. When we did the original implementation, we actually built a new platform, and or SAP built a platform, and we adopted it. Now, at that time, there were no real accelerators, but over the last well, 10 years in the meanwhile, a lot of things have changed. So SAP says Grow is an accelerated deployment. And is this then really so? And what is it that you can actually get out of this? So I was browsing a lot of these informations that are available, and I like these. They're SAP standard slides, which you no doubt recognize. But what I found interesting is it gives a nice, good overview of what SAP S4 Public Grow comes with out of the box. And the base of it is what you see here. You see here is what they call back office ERP, which is a finance-led administrative ERP. So it's basically just focused on companies that want to run their specialist business or their core business in whatever platform that they use for that. And then in terms of financial consolidation, record to report processes and so forth, they would use SAP. And this is something, and you see the different modules here, procure to pay, order to cash, and so forth. So all the different things here, they come with accelerators in the solution itself, where you can run quick configuration for all these different modules or functions. And as a consequence, the modules that you see here, if we can stick to the standards that are largely available, and in smaller companies, this is typically easier, right? Because smaller companies, they are typically finding their way. They don't have too many, they don't have too many different options on how they have standardized their processes and so forth. So they're still open to find these things out. And if this is the case, then you can leverage of the standards that are available. And as a consequence, you can bring a system like this live in something like 3 months. And of course, we're not talking about 10 countries and so forth. We're talking about a company that has an entity in one country that focuses on the back office ERP. And then you don't do integrations, banks, and so forth. Those you do in a later phase. But in principle, a small company that focuses on this core scope can start a project and go live in a matter of 3 months. And it's something that we have done in the past and definitely feasible. Now, beyond that initial scope, and then we're not talking about a 3 months timeline, then things will change. But even then, there are product-centric configuration options available in the tool itself, so in the platform itself, that allow you to accelerate the configuration of options around manufacturing. And you can see here as production scheduling or demand forecasting and so forth. So a number of these functions in a relatively standardized way, of course, are available as part of the standard capabilities, but not only the standard capabilities, but also in terms of accelerated configurators. These functions are available in the cloud platform itself, which means that instead of months of configuration work to configure all the different details, you can basically set up a standard configuration in a matter of days or weeks. And with that standard configuration, you can engage the business and discuss, this is the configuration, tweak it, and as you tweak it, it becomes what people really expect, and then release it for operations. Now, service-centric is, it's basically, you have the previous one is streamlining manufacturing, and that's one capability that is there. The original one is services. When you look at what we originally did in the first implementation that we did in Delaware, that one was services centric, and it has remained a core capability of S/4HANA Public Cloud, which basically can focus on services-based businesses, IT services or law or any other service-centric company can actually run S/4HANA and again use these accelerators and so forth to come to a point where they can very quickly adopt an initial scope and go from there. Now, the Grow idea is actually related to this. This is an interesting picture which I picked up somewhere for a different vendor. So this is not something that SAP pushed, but it's something that all of us probably know. The moment that you have any type of ERP solution or any type of software solution that you adopt, if you lose too much time during the implementation, then you will lose your customers and your audience. And whether it is an internal audience or it is an end customer of yours, it doesn't really matter. If we spend too much time before we create value, we basically lose the attention. People believe that they didn't make the right investments, and there is a risk that they will turn their back on whichever solution it is that we're basically talking about. And that is what with Grow is being focused on, or what I focus on trying to avoid. The image that you see here is a standard ERP implementation or a standard software implementation that is anything very large in size. Typically, you have a lot of discussions, then you do your implementation. Typically, in an ERP implementation, there is a lot of delays. I mean, I haven't seen many that haven't incurred significant delays if you really go and try to do everything. So deployment is delayed, people get disconnected, implementation struggles, and then in many cases, it gets back on track and eventually it gets delivered. Now, these are very tricky situations where the period that you see here between deployment is delayed and disconnected, sometimes we're talking about years, 1.5, 2 years or something like this. And with Grow, of course, it's not focused on very large enterprise, but with Grow, the whole idea is the moment that you implement, you create a short time to value, which basically means the initial implementation will be first 3 months. And you identify additional pieces of scope or additional pieces of functionality that you will release as part of the next phases. So in essence, it's kind of a mix between a waterfall methodology and an agile methodology, with the aim to make sure that people start using the system, they understand what they want. The next set of requirements they will be able to define better, and as a consequence, in a kind of an iterative way, in different phases, you release additional functionality, but relatively quickly. Instead of doing years over a deployment, you do months, and then every phase becomes a next step to create more value and more buy-in, and actually you have better decisions because people know what they're working with and how they want to go and evolve whatever they already have. So with Grow, this is really something that is strongly focused on. Now then, the question is, okay, it's a small platform, Grow, and we start with small companies or medium-sized companies, but I mean, is it actually globally capable? Well, it is right now sold in most markets, as far as I know. There are over 59 local localizations. Now, the localizations, I mean, let's be very clear, the localizations aren't always 100%. And the business will have different expectations about a specific localization and so forth. So even if SAP says here, there are 59 localizations, these localizations will cover some level of localization scope for countries, but it may not always meet all the needs or all the expectations of your local business users in whichever country that they are. Now, that in itself should not stop you, because there are plenty of possibilities or options to evolve the platform. Now, when you look at this case study, so this is basically a project that we're currently engaged on. So to give you an idea on can it be used for global deployments? So this company is a company that we started in the beginning of 2024. End of 2024, it had, I don't remember, around 50 countries live. And in this year, we're actually just gearing up to do another, the scope changed a bit. We're going to do 52. But in principle, before the end of this year, we should have 52 additional countries that are going to be live on this S4 public implementation. So within a span of probably by mid-2026, we want to have all 140 countries live. Of course, this means that some choices need to be made. You cannot do everything like in an old style ERP engagement. So we have a very strict global template. We really look at which are the localizations that we can entertain as part of the base deployment. But in principle, this is the best example of demonstration that this platform is global capable. It's speed over accuracy. So there are some completeness topics. There are some local reporting topics that we don't always cover, which we then put in the long tail, and we will update as the project goes along. We basically have two project streams. One is the rollout of new countries, and the other one is catching up on specific requirements or localization topics which haven't been deployed as part of the initial engagement. So scalability wise, you can go either small company, 3 months, and evolve from there, or like in this case, you have a global company, a standardized template, and you deploy 140 countries in 2.5 years. So both of these options are totally possible. So key takeaway on Grow is really low entry. And what for me always has been a bit of an apprehension is, I mean, as everyone always says, SAP is expensive. If you look at the higher end of the market, that's of course, is not a secret. SAP is not cheap. But if you look at Grow, the entry level for Grow is 50,000 euros per year for a base setup for a small company. And that, I think, is something that is definitely achievable for many companies, especially if you look at the difference between a Grow implementation and either an on-premise or a private cloud deployment. The cost difference is very significant, and I believe that what SAP has done here in terms of creating a low entry, it's very interesting. The price point is definitely accessible for companies in the mid-market and even in the lower mid-market. And thanks to the fact that this is a mature platform that can scale, companies can actually start low and have the platform grow with them. Like the example of the services company that I just mentioned earlier, start with 800 people, and 10 years later, you have 5,500 people that are live on the same platform, and the platform has evolved. So that is actually a bit how you need to see Grow. I typically try to keep the presentation relatively short. It's a bit longer than I anticipated this time, but I will open the floor for questions or comments or feedback.